My mother-in-law threw out my college degree claiming it was worthless paper, and my husband said she was just organizing. Calm down, so I threw out his gaming setup and told him they were worthless toys, and when he freaked out, I said I was just organizing and asked why he can't calm down like he told me to do when his mother destroyed my 6 years of hard work. I never thought I'd be writing one of these posts, but here I am at 2 a.m. unable to sleep because I'm so angry I could scream. My name is Sarah, and I'm 28 years old. I've been married to my husband Jake for 3 years now, and we've been together for 6 years total. For the most part, we have a good relationship, but there's one massive problem that's been getting worse over time: his mother, Linda. Linda has never liked me from day one. I think she had this fantasy that Jake would marry some traditional housewife type who would worship the ground she walks on. Instead, Jake married me, a woman with a master's degree in biochemistry who works as a research scientist at a pharmaceutical company. I make good money, I'm independent, and I don't take crap from anyone, including her. The problem started small at first. Little comments about how I work too much and how Jake needs a woman who can take care of him properly. She'd make passive-aggressive remarks about my cooking or cleaning, even though Jake and I split household duties pretty evenly. She'd constantly suggest that maybe I should think about having babies soon because women shouldn't wait too long. My degree isn't just a piece of paper to me. It represents 6 years of sacrifice, countless all-nighters, missing social events to study, living on ramen noodles to save money, writing a thesis that took me 2 years to complete, and proving to myself that I could achieve something difficult and meaningful. That degree hangs framed in our home office, and every time I look at it I remember what I'm capable of accomplishing. Fast forward to last weekend. Jake and I went out of town for his friend's wedding, and we asked Linda to house sit for us since we'd be gone for 3 days. She's done this before without any major incidents, so we thought it would be fine. We gave her our spare key and asked her to just water the plants and bring in the mail. When we got home Sunday evening, I immediately noticed something was off. Linda was still there, which was weird because we told her we'd be back around 6 p.m. and it was almost 8. She seemed nervous and kept making small talk, which isn't like her at all. Jake didn't notice anything unusual, but I had this sinking feeling in my stomach. After she left, I went to unpack, and that's when I noticed my home office looked different. It was cleaner than I'd left it, which should have been a good thing, but something felt wrong. The desk was organized differently and some of my books had been moved around. Then I looked at the wall where my degree had been hanging, and it was gone. I called Jake over immediately and asked him where my degree was. He looked confused and said he didn't know. We searched the entire office thinking maybe it had fallen down or been moved somewhere else, but it was nowhere to be found. That's when I remembered Linda acting strange, and it all clicked together. I called her right away and asked if she'd seen my degree. There was this long pause before she said, "Oh, that old thing? I threw it away when I was organizing your office. You had so much clutter in there, and that frame was just taking up wall space. I didn't think you'd mind since it's just an old piece of paper anyway." I literally couldn't speak for a full 30 seconds. Jake took the phone from me, and I could hear Linda telling him that she was just trying to help and that she didn't realize I was so attached to it and that it seemed like junk since it was just sitting there collecting dust. When Jake hung up, I was crying angry tears. I asked him to call her back and demand that she dig it out of whatever dumpster she'd thrown it in. Instead, he put his hands on my shoulders and said, "Babe, I know you're upset, but she was just trying to organize and help out. She didn't mean any harm. Just calm down and we can get you a new copy from your university." Calm down. Calm down. This woman deliberately threw away something precious to me, and he wanted me to calm down like it was no big deal. I told him that it wasn't about getting a replacement, it was about the fact that his mother had deliberately destroyed something important to me and was making excuses for her instead of being outraged on my behalf. Jake said I was overreacting and that Linda doesn't understand the sentimental value of things like that and that I should try to see it from her perspective. He actually suggested that maybe we should have put the degree somewhere safer if it was so important to me. Basically blaming me for trusting his mother in our own home. I was so hurt and angry that I didn't even know what to say. I went to bed that night feeling completely unsupported and disrespected by the person who's supposed to have my back above everyone else's. I stewed about it all week. The more I thought about it, the more obvious it became that Linda had thrown out my degree on purpose. She'd made comments before about my education and career. She knew exactly what she was doing when she decided that my accomplishment was junk that needed to be thrown away. Friday evening, Jake was in the basement playing video games like he does most nights after work. He has this elaborate gaming setup down there, multiple monitors, a high-end PC he built himself, expensive gaming chair, professional headset, the works. He's really proud of it and spends hours every night playing online with his friends. I went down to the basement and started unplugging everything. Jake turned around and asked what I was doing. I told him I was organizing and that all this electronic stuff was just cluttering up the basement. I said I was going to throw it all away since it was just worthless plastic toys anyway. Jake jumped up and started yelling at me to stop touching his stuff. He said I was being crazy and demanded to know what was wrong with me. I kept unplugging cords and told him to calm down because I was just trying to help organize and I didn't realize he was so attached to these old toys. That's when it clicked for him. His face went white and he said, "This is about your degree, isn't it?" I told him it absolutely was and asked him how it felt to watch someone dismiss something important to him as worthless junk. I asked him how it felt to be told to calm down when someone he trusted was destroying his prized possessions. Jake tried to say it wasn't the same thing because his gaming setup cost thousands of dollars. I pointed out that my degree cost thousands of dollars too when you factor in tuition, books, and living expenses for 6 years. I told him that the monetary value wasn't even the point, it was about someone deliberately destroying something meaningful and then acting like the victim's reaction was unreasonable. We had a huge fight that night. Jake accused me of being vindictive and petty. I told him I was just giving him a taste of his own medicine so he could understand how I felt when he dismissed my feelings about his mother's actions. He said throwing out my degree was an accident but destroying his gaming setup was intentional revenge. I laughed and asked him if he really believed his mother's actions were accidental. I pointed out that she'd specifically targeted the one thing in our house that represented my education and career, the thing she'd been making snide comments about for years. I asked him if he thought it was a coincidence that she'd thrown away my degree but left everything else in the office untouched. Eventually I told Jake that I wasn't actually going to throw away his gaming stuff but that I wanted him to understand how it felt to have someone dismiss something important to you. I said that if he could acknowledge that what his mother did was wrong and demand that she apologize, then we could move past this. Jake slept on the couch that night. Saturday morning he was quiet and seemed to be thinking things over. Around noon he called his mother and I could hear him talking to her in the kitchen. When he came back to the living room he looked defeated. He told me that Linda had admitted she threw out my degree on purpose. She'd said she was tired of seeing that thing every time she came over and that she thought Sarah needed to be taken down a peg because I was too proud of myself. She'd also said that a good wife would focus on supporting her husband instead of flaunting her education. Jake said he told Linda that what she did was completely unacceptable and that she needed to apologize to me immediately. Linda had apparently started crying and saying that she was just looking out for Jake and that I was turning him against his own mother. She'd refused to apologize and hung up on him. Jake apologized for not believing me initially and for telling me to calm down. He said he'd been in denial about his mother's behavior because he didn't want to accept that she could be so malicious. He promised that Linda wouldn't be allowed in our house anymore until she gave me a sincere apology. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since the degree incident and Linda did not take well to being banned from our house. The day after Jake told her she wasn't welcome until she apologized, she showed up anyway while we were both at work. She used her spare key and let herself in. I only found out because our neighbor texted me that she'd seen Linda going into our house. I left work early and came home to find Linda in my kitchen making dinner for Jake. She acted like nothing had happened and told me she was making his favorite pot roast. When I asked her what she was doing in our house after being told she wasn't welcome, she said she didn't understand why I was being so dramatic over a silly misunderstanding. I told her to leave immediately and she refused. She said this was her son's house and she had every right to be there. I called Jake and put him on speakerphone so he could tell his mother to leave. Linda started crying and saying that I was trying to destroy their relationship. Jake told her firmly that she needed to apologize to me and leave our house or he was going to call the police. Linda threw a tantrum like a toddler. She started screaming that I was a manipulative witch who was poisoning her son against her. She said I thought I was better than everyone else because of my fancy degree and that I needed to learn my place. Then she made the mistake of grabbing the pot roast she'd been cooking and throwing it against our kitchen wall. Sauce and meat went everywhere and left a huge stain. That's when I'd had enough. I called 911 and reported that someone had broken into our house and was refusing to leave and destroying our property. When the police arrived, Linda tried to play the victim grandmother who was being abused by her evil daughter-in-law. But the officers could see the mess she'd made in our kitchen and we had the text messages where Jake had told her not to come over. They explained to her that she couldn't just let herself into someone else's house even if she had a key. Linda was escorted out while screaming that we'd regret this and that she was going to tell everyone what kind of person I really was. Jake was shaken up by the whole thing but also seemed relieved that he'd finally seen his mother's true colors without any ambiguity. The next day Jake went to his mother's house to get our spare key back and have a serious conversation with her. He told me later that Linda had spent the whole time either crying or yelling about how I was destroying their family. She'd refused to take responsibility for throwing out my degree or for breaking into our house. Since then, Linda has been on a campaign to turn Jake's extended family against me. She's been calling his aunts and cousins, telling them that I'm trying to isolate Jake from his family and that I call the police on her for no reason. Some of them have reached out to Jake to check on him. Jake has been handling it really well, though. He's been honest with his family members about what actually happened, and several of them have told him they're not surprised. Apparently, Linda has a history of dramatic behavior that everyone just tolerated because that's how she is. Update 2. 3 weeks have passed now, and Linda has escalated things in a way I never saw coming. Last Monday, I got a call at work from someone claiming to be from my university's alumni office. The woman said they'd received a complaint about me fraudulently claiming to have a degree from their institution, and they needed to verify my enrollment records. Apparently, someone had called the university claiming to be a concerned employer who had reason to believe I was lying about my educational credentials. The caller had said they discovered I didn't actually have the degree I claimed and that the university should investigate whether I was committing fraud. The alumni office lady was very nice and apologetic when she realized the complaint was bogus. She confirmed that yes, I absolutely had graduated with a master's degree in biochemistry and that my records were all legitimate. She said they get these kinds of fake complaints sometimes, usually from disgruntled family members trying to cause trouble. When I hung up, I immediately knew it had to be Linda. I called Jake and told him what had happened. He was furious and said he was going to confront his mother immediately. That evening, Jake drove to Linda's house and asked her point blank if she'd called my university. She denied it at first, but when Jake told her the alumni office had records of a call and could trace it back to her phone number, she broke down and admitted it. Linda's reasoning was that she thought if the university investigated me, they'd find out I was lying about something and Jake would finally see that I wasn't as perfect as I pretended to be. She'd apparently convinced herself that no one could legitimately earn a master's degree that young and that I must have cheated somehow. But Linda wasn't done. 2 days later, I got a friend request on Facebook from a fake account. The account started commenting on my posts, calling me a fraud and claiming that I was lying about my education to impress people. The comments were clearly from Linda based on the writing style and specific details only she would know. The breaking point came last Friday when Linda showed up at my workplace. She somehow found out where I work and came to the pharmaceutical company's reception desk asking to speak with me. She told the receptionist she was my mother-in-law and needed to discuss urgent family business. My boss happened to be walking through the lobby when this happened and overheard Linda telling the receptionist that there were questions about my educational background that needed to be addressed. My boss came over and asked what was going on. Linda introduced herself and started telling my boss that she was concerned about my dishonesty regarding my qualifications and thought he should know that I might be misrepresenting my credentials. She actually suggested that the company should verify my degree because she had reason to believe it might not be legitimate. My boss, who has known me for 3 years and obviously knows my qualifications are real, was completely confused. He politely told Linda that my credentials had been thoroughly verified during the hiring process and that she needed to leave the premises immediately. Linda refused to leave and started raising her voice about how everyone was being fooled by me and that she was just trying to protect people from my lies. Security had to escort her out while she was still ranting about my fake degree. The whole thing was mortifying. My coworkers were staring and asking if I was okay. My boss called me into his office afterward to make sure I was safe and to ask if I needed help dealing with what was clearly a harassment situation. That night, Jake and I had a serious conversation about next steps. We both agreed that Linda's behavior had become dangerous and that we needed legal intervention. We consulted with a lawyer who specializes in harassment cases. She said we had a strong case for a restraining order based on the pattern of behavior, the deliberate destruction of property, breaking into our house, calling my university with false complaints, creating fake social media accounts to harass me, and showing up at my workplace to spread lies about me. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday, and what happened there was beyond anything I could have predicted. Linda showed up with a lawyer and a folder full of what she claimed was evidence of my fraudulent behavior. Her evidence included printouts of my LinkedIn profile with things circled in red pen where she'd tried to find inconsistencies. She'd also brought a notebook where she'd written down everything she could remember about conversations we'd had and tried to find contradictions. But the most insane thing was that Linda had actually hired a private investigator to look into my background. She'd spent thousands of dollars trying to find proof that I was lying about my education. The PI had, of course, found nothing because there was nothing to find. The judge listened to Linda's presentation with obvious confusion and growing irritation. When she started claiming that I'd somehow faked my university transcripts, the judge cut her off and asked if she had any actual evidence rather than conspiracy theories. When it was our turn to present our evidence, the contrast was stark. We had clear documentation of Linda's harassment behavior with dates, times, and witnesses. The judge granted our restraining order immediately and was clearly disgusted by Linda's behavior. Linda had a complete meltdown in the courtroom. She started screaming that the judge was being fooled just like everyone else and that I was going to destroy her family. Court security had to physically restrain her when she tried to lunge toward our table. The restraining order prohibits Linda from contacting me directly or indirectly, coming within 500 feet of me or my workplace, and spreading false information about me to third parties. Since then, Linda has been relatively quiet, which is almost more unsettling than her previous escalation. The whole experience has actually brought Jake and me closer together. He's seen how important it is to support your partner when family members cross lines, and I've seen that he's willing to prioritize our marriage even when it's difficult. I still get angry sometimes when I think about my original degree hanging in a dumpster somewhere, but I did get a replacement copy from my university. The most satisfying part is that Linda's plan completely backfired. Instead of driving a wedge between Jake and me, she showed him exactly who she really is. Sometimes the best revenge really is just letting toxic people expose themselves.